Welcome, welcome everyone. And I promise it is a very beautiful day because look who we have with us today. Who do we have with us today? Say your name.
It's
Say.
Malumir Logan, back
There
again.
you go. Yeah, and do you know why she's here today? Because I enjoy what she has to say. She's such an interesting person and she's like a ray of light. And we're going to speak about something a bit different today. And this is why she's here with us today. Now, what she's going to speak about is spiritualism. Yes, you've heard it. Something very different she was speaking about before. So let's take it away. Let's do this in real time and let's start off. So, where does your journey start with spiritualism? Because we weren't talking about that the last two times.
Spirituality is so important to me, and it's also it's something that's been with me for, I think, as long as I have existed. So, I would say that spirituality has been with me since I was a young child. I remember as a really, like, even as an infant, I get flashes of memories of things that now I can only say are spiritual. For example, I used to be able, so I'm not sure if you've heard of what an aura is. Auras, and for those who aren't familiar, an aura is, it's the idea that all living things have energy, and it's almost like we kind of exude them. So the feeling of when, someone walks into the room and they haven't even said anything yet, but you can tell they're like really angry, like they've had because you can almost feel it. Or the idea of someone walks into the room and you just go, that kind of feeling. It's like that idea, except with auras, the idea is that you could almost see the energy or feel the energy, and it often has a color associated with it. So there's lots of background on that for folks who who have studied that kind of thing, and it's been a part of a number of belief systems. But for me, here I was as a little kid, not having any education on these belief systems, and certainly they were not a part of my own family's beliefs whatsoever. But I just thought that this is how people saw things, because I could see auras coming off of plants and trees. And I would just sit there, and the sky also kind of seemed to sparkle. And like trees, like, and plants, I would just look at these. It was like almost just colorful poofs, and I didn't know what they were. I just thought that that was normal. And I just thought that everyone saw that. And I didn't even talk about it because it was just, well, it was just like anything else. Like, there's a tree over there. Yes, there's a tree, and it was exuding, these colorful poofs. And so, my spirituality was so much a part of me when I was very young, unfortunately. And, what we've discussed it a bit in the past, my family life was not a safer or a particularly loving one growing up. And they also had particular religious belief systems that over time were enforced. And so I would say that so much of my own spiritual experience and it wasn't even what I believed. It was just what I was experiencing. So much of it got really tamped down, really repressed. But thankfully I did come back to it. I did come back to myself, really. But that's been quite a journey.
Okay, so I can imagine, look, there's a huge amount to talk about with your background to do with spiritualism, because you obviously had this natural gift that you can see the auras. Now, listeners, auras tend to be given reasonably easy when we're children. But as we get older, we tend to lose the gift, and many people do not hold on to that gift. So for you, how long is it a situation that you saw auras from as far as you can remember?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And with these auras, you said they have different colors.
Yeah, they would have different colors, and the colors would like, I saw them especially on plants. Like it was that, because otherwise I wasn't really, just kind of gazing, staring at people, but I loved being outdoors. I loved being outside, and I still love being outside. And I would just sit and, I would just observe. I would, and I still always look up to the sky. It's actually, I can't run these days due to my my medical situation, but
Mhm.
what my favorite thing when running is actually looking up at the sky, not down at the ground where my feet are. But anyway, I absolutely loved it. And they were all different colors. They'd be all different colors. I had an uncanny ability as a small child to suss out exactly where people were coming from. So I wasn't noticing auras for them, which I actually think is interesting now. Thinking back on, I think it's funny because I could see auras on plants, like in nature, but when it came to humans, I wasn't noticing that, but I immediately could tell what exactly was going on with someone. Like a 4-year-old kid, how I didn't even know what the concept of being what manipulation was, or
Mhm.
what
Mhm.
being, someone being fake nice. What 4-year-old understands that? And yet I could suss it out. So I think, those kinds of spiritual abilities and intuition were very strong from as long as I could remember, until I had to repress them all.
Hmm. So you said you were able to suss things out. Is it due to the colors meant something in particular? Where if it was a certain color, it meant a certain mood shift, and if it was another color, it was another mood shift. How was you able to be very specific to tell whether they were angry, happy, etc.? What was it that gave you those inkling situations on what was what mood wise?
Interestingly, so I wasn't seeing colorful auras on people. I only saw the colorful auras on plants. When it came to people, it's like I would just look at them, and it's like I cognitively knew. And I think that these days that does tend to be um one of my abilities, is my connection with my intuition on just knowing. So it may, some people talk about like claircognizance or clairvoyance or clairaudience, where you might, you when you hear things, that's how you get, a sense of clarity. Or when you, if you're clear seeing, that's what the clair means. It means clear seeing. Or some people smell certain things. For me, it's just been a sudden sense of this is what it is, or this is what. And I will say, as an adult, and I think one of the processes of learning and unlearning and relearning, which is, we also have to be mindful, because I think that, as we've discussed before, growing up in society, we have also lots of unconscious stuff. We have unconscious good things like our gifts, and we have unconscious stuff that we've learned. And how do we tell the difference between which is which? I think that is such important work to do for people who are interested in spirituality, because we can also end up putting a lot of our own stuff onto spirituality that has no business being a part of spirituality.
Give us a for instance.
For example, spiritual bypassing. Spiritual bypassing is when people try to say that everything that you're experiencing, it's because of something that you did. So if you're going, let's say for someone who's had cancer, well, you've had cancer because of all of these spiritual reasons. And the reason it's called spiritual bypassing is that spiritual bypassing, it actively ignores all of the other kind of external factors that still exist. For example, as much as I absolutely agree that it's important to think about where we're keeping our mindset, where we're keeping our own energy, I also think that we shouldn't ignore our physical reality around us. There are very real external factors that are affecting us on a daily basis. For example, are we breathing in pollution all the time? Are there, have chemicals kind of leached into things? Are we, without knowing it, what kinds of things are we taking in the environment? And you know what? It's the physical world. Stuff happens, right? Bad things just sometimes happen, and that is just the way life goes. And it's also okay. We just have to figure out how we're going to adjust and respond and move forward. So, but I think that quite often when people are doing spiritual bypassing, when they're trying to make everything, well, all these bad things are happening to you because you're not being positive enough. You're being too negative, or you brought this on yourself. Okay, where's that coming from? Because for someone to say that, in my experience, it typically means they're avoiding parts of themselves where they actually need to get comfortable with what is uncomfortable. Right? Maybe they need to do some emotional work, right? And do some counseling work, because if for people who are unwilling to recognize that external factors are in fact real and they can, there are things that can be out of your control. Perhaps there are some issues with feeling out of control, times in their lives that they've felt out of control. And so maybe they really believe that, no, I have to believe that I can have full control over my life and that nothing bad can happen to me if I follow this formula. That's not spirituality. That's putting a lot of your own stuff onto spirituality and trying to make it spiritual. So that's an example.
Wow. Okay. So you've obviously studied it. Not only have you lived this, but you've studied it quite in depth. Now, remember in the other podcast that we did together, we talked about neurodivergence and your business and etc. Let's talk about neurodivergence. Is there any connection between the gifts of being open as a neurodivergence and being able to see things such as auras and other things similar to that, or is there no creativity from that point of view?
So I haven't come across any work that's been done on that topic, but I've thought about it. I've thought about it a lot because I've noted, being involved in various spiritual communities of various modalities and interests, what becomes clear to me is that often people who are drawn to spiritual communities, especially the spiritual communities where people are okay with being upfront about everything not being, peachy keen, right? Especially when people are willing to say, yeah, I'm going through stuff and it's hard. Those types of, communities, for example, the tarot community, like tarot cards, that tends to be a very diverse community. It's one of the reasons I love that community so much, right? I feel like I actually belong there. And it's those kinds of communities, I've noticed they often do end up having a lot of people in them who may often be seen as different in some way, right? And so I've thought about it a lot, about, the neurodivergence, and I can see almost two different aspects of it. I think there's the one aspect of maybe in being neurodivergent, maybe you're just, because you're the different types of neurodivergence, because maybe things are firing faster, or maybe there's less gating, or maybe you're just seeing things as they are, and maybe there is less concern for what other people think. So maybe you are just more comfortable and open to just experience what is there without adding additional layers to it. But I think there's the other aspect where for some people, maybe it could actually be overwhelming, especially because of the lack of gating, the neurological gating that happens, where so one aspect of neurodivergence, of course, is the lack of a gating mechanism in our brains, where that's why often if you ask a neurodivergent person a very open-ended question, it could be very overwhelming because, well, I could answer that 35 different ways just to get started, and then I could expand on each of those in 35 different ways. And so when it comes to spirituality, if it's already a bit of a sensory overload to be engaging with the physical world, it may, for some people, if they haven't learned the skills of how to interact with spirituality, it may also then feel overwhelming from a sensory perspective. But something you said earlier, actually, when you said, I think that, a lot of people have these skills and abilities when they're very young, and then we outgrow them. I think that is actually just because kids aren't actually being taught that many kids, like in some cultures, it is actually like spiritual beliefs are just a part of the culture. And so, those kids do grow up. This is just part of what you learn. But I think particularly in a globalized and, fairly colonized world, in those parts of the world, spirituality is looked down upon And so as kids, many kids, we've grown up not actually being taught how to use those skills, not actually being taught that, you don't actually have to be overwhelmed by all the spiritual things you see. You're allowed to set up boundaries, right?
Mm.
And I mean, boundaries are healthy in life, regardless of whether you're talking about spirituality or emotions or whatever. But it's something I've thought about it a lot. It would be very interesting to, get a sense of whether, more broadly, people who are neurodivergent, what their experiences are of spirituality, whether it's any kind of different from folks who are holistic. But I don't know of any actual studies or anything like that.
I know. I mean, when I was growing up, I saw things when I was growing up, and I saw auras and etc. But that started to alleviate as I got older. But who knows whether that was neurodivergence or just another child that was more open-minded and more open to the fact they can. I think what it is, as you were saying before, because it's a situation where, as children, you're open to everything, right? That's how we children as we're growing up. And then we are taught belief systems, which start to gate us off from all different things. Well, I shouldn't say all, but a lot of different things in life. And so that stops us from seeing, feeling, believing in certain systems. So I think that's what it's due to. But I find just the whole subject matter just so fascinating, because it's such a vast subject, right?
And so diverse. There is just as much diversity in spirituality as there is in anything else. And the spirituality has been so important to me as a way of finding myself again. And I think that inherently that idea of finding ourselves again, I think, is a crucial journey of any and every adult. I think it's very few adults who have genuinely actually just gotten to always be so aligned with who they naturally are. And, I think part of that is just natural. As you say, we go to school and we learn ways of thinking. And I think that, education is obviously very important. And we can't help the fact that growing up in society means that we absorb whatever is in society. But I do think that the coming back to who we are naturally, because it doesn't mean that we're, and I'm not saying that, I was someone who I totally wasn't, until I, came back to spirituality. I'm not quite saying that. What I mean is that I think that, we almost become a bit fragmented from parts of ourselves within ourselves until we start doing whatever kind of modality helps us kind of bring ourselves back together, so that we're actually just complete. We already have all the pieces we need. No one is broken per se. We're not missing anything. It's just that we've kind of maybe become too compartmentalized within ourselves. Like each little part of us has to live in a different room. Well, maybe they don't have to live in a different room. Maybe they can all live in the same house. And I think there are so many different expressions of spirituality that people can play with and explore. And even for people who think, well, I'm not spiritual and I'm not into that, and you know what, you don't have to be. My own belief on what is spiritual, I actually see it as connection to that which is outside of myself. That's what I think spirituality is. It's connection to that which is beyond myself. So, you know what? That could be community. That could just be about being connected to community. That could be about being connected to the ground that I'm on now, the land that I'm on. And if we were all making decisions in a way that recognize that we are actually connected to others, maybe we'd all be making slightly better decisions, right? Maybe collectively we'd be making better decisions, because we would realize, well, it's not just all about me right now and in this moment, right? Maybe leaders might make different decisions. Maybe corporations might make different decisions. And, I think so, even for people who feel that, I'm just not interested in spirituality, it's a bunch of weird woo-woo and I'm not into it, fine. You don't have to do that modality. Maybe you just start exploring the idea that you have a connection to other people. What you do does have an impact on other people. You're already influencing other people. You're influencing your immediate environment. You're influencing the world around you, even if it seems to be in small ways. You're still having an impact.
Mm. So now we've already spoken about the aura side of things. What other things that have affected you in life that could be seen as very strongly and impacted your life spiritually? So the auras you've dealt with, have you ever come across anything else? Maybe someone that you've known that's died and you're in touch with them somehow, or anything else? Have you got anything else to add to your story?
Oh, yes. Yes. So a bit of a content warning on people who may be struggling with whether they want to stay on this world. Many, many years ago, this was, oh gosh, how long ago was this? Maybe 20 plus years ago. I want to say 22-ish years ago. I went through an exceptionally difficult time, and it felt like all of my, both my romantic relationship at the time and my close friendships, everything just ended all at the same time. I was working multiple frontline jobs, trying to make ends meet. I was living below the poverty line. It was a really, really rough time. And now at this point, although I didn't consider myself spiritual, I was still practicing the religion that I had been raised with. And I was, talking to that God. And I just said, listen, I'm sorry, I can't do this anymore. Like, I can't do this anymore. I've tried so hard. I can't do this. I really thought that, that things would work out. I thought you would have planned for me, but I can't do this. I'm so sorry. I'm just so sorry. I can't do this. As I was having this conversation, I was driving my car, and it was late at night. And I just, in that moment, I decided, you know what, the next big tree I see, I'm just gonna be done with it. I can't do that. Like, the heaviness was it was just too much. It just felt too much. And the thing about me is I'm very committed. And once I make a decision, I've made it. And so I started scanning, the road ahead. And then suddenly the northern lights, the aurora borealis, erupted over the small town that I lived in the distance. And I was like, this is not a town that gets the aurora borealis. That was Southern Ontario. Southern Ontario, very occasionally sees the northern lights. I'd literally never seen the northern lights before in my life. They suddenly, in that moment, erupted over this small town.
Wow.
And I was like, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. And I pulled over to the side of the road. I burst into tears. I'm like, okay, message received. I get it. I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Because how else do you describe that in that moment, when I was moments away from, making a decision I could never turn back from, in that moment, the northern lights just appeared and stopped me. And that was one example. Another example was, I'd say about a decade ago, a friend of mine, his father was dealing with cancer and unfortunately passed away. And my friend, called me and told me, I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, that's horrible. And he asked, will you please come, to the wake? It's on such and such. Absolutely. And yeah, we'll pick up our mutual friends. Yes, we'll be there for you. So I sat down into my regular meditation that morning, the morning of the wake, and I was just sitting there when it suddenly felt like someone was sitting next to me. And I kind of jolted a bit because in my mind's eye, it was like there was this man that I didn't recognize sitting next to me while I was trying to meditate. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I was like, this is like, I don't know what to do. Like, what do I do? This is weird. And, so I did some, spiritual protective stuff, and I'm like, okay, no one's allowed in this space. So the person went away, and I was like, that was a bit jarring. So, then we all, we picked up the friends and we went, we arrived at the location where they were holding our friend's father's wake. And we walk past everyone. And so, we hugged all the family, gave my friend a big hug, turned around, and it was open casket. And I gasped. Because he had cancer, he looked so dramatically different. I actually didn't recognize him. But this was the same man who had shown up in my morning meditation and shocked me, was now the same person who was lying in this casket. And I was like, oh my goodness. Wow. Okay. So message received. But then, it was a matter of, well, okay, what exactly was going on? And it was basically just this father who had passed away had a very specific message of love that he wanted to relay to his kid that he just never communicated when he was alive, and just held so much regret, was really, really upset that he hadn't just communicated this. And so I waited a few weeks because I was a bit like, well, this is weird. Like, I haven't been in this situation before. This is really weird. Like, I'm feeling like a translator. And also this was really uncanny. This is not something you expect, and I'm thinking, and also what will people think if they know this about me? But a few weeks later, I had the honest conversation with my friend, not knowing how my friend was going to take it. I thought, is this person never going to talk to me again? But instead was actually so grateful to hear, the message from their father. So, all in all, it that situation worked out, but that was quite an interesting time, because that was right around the time that I was deconstructing from a lot of the religious beliefs that had kind of been forced upon me that weren't mine. And like, I'm totally for people, if you have religious beliefs that are important to you, believe them. I have nothing whatsoever against that. I think that, religion is rich and can be so beautiful. And it's like anything else. It's how is it being used? That's important. Definitely. And, so I was going through a time of questioning and exploring, and I was really working on opening up my spiritual sights again and my spiritual intuition. And so this was all happening around that time. So that was another moment of, wow, you can't make this stuff up.
Right. Well, after experiencing that, did you come across similar experiences? Because usually what happens in spiritualism, when something opens up, a doorway opens up, an experience, it can happen again. So did something similar happen later on? Did you get reoccurring situations like that?
I did. It started to get to the point, though, that I thought, you know what, I'm not, this isn't something that I know that I want to do. Like, I was open to exploring it, but and what happened is that, some people found out and they wanted to come to me for readings, right, for their past loved ones. And so I started doing those, just very informally. And there was, this one person who came to me who it was just this transformative experience for her, with her, and with her relationship with her grandmother, and like all these things that I couldn't possibly have otherwise known, because she wasn't someone who was a friend. She was just someone who happened to be in my, my social circle. And it was such an amazing experience that she went on and really strongly pushed one of her friends to come to me. So this person showed up, and it was in an earlier time when I didn't yet have the confidence that I would have now. If someone came to me, say for coaching or whatever, and they just did not want to have the conversation, I think I would say, I wonder if perhaps we should put a pause on this. If this is something you're not interested in, I'll refund you. And then, you can reassess in the future if you want to come back. And I would just very nicely and respectfully end the conversation. Unfortunately, I did not yet have that, had not yet developed those kinds of boundaries. And so this person showed up and they already seemed angry. I'm like, I don't understand why this person is angry. But I'm like, you know what? I don't know what their relationship with their past person was.
Of
And
course.
the thing was that prior to this person coming for this reading, similar thing had happened where I would be in meditation and this man that I didn't recognize, I would see in my mind's eye, and he just kept showing up. But I was very uncomfortable with him. Like it was a bit weird. And then at one point I'm like, okay, like I think that you're connected with this person who's coming for a reading, but like, please, like you can come back then, like, you know, please in the meantime, leave me alone, let me meditate in peace. And so when she came to the reading, you know, I was, you know, getting, you know, clear images about things that had happened, and it just seemed like it had not been a great relationship between, you know, this person and her. And maybe he'd been someone who just had a very kind of like forceful personality in general, which is what I had experienced. But, you know, so in these readings, as any reading, how you tend to engage with people is you say, so I'm getting such and such, you know, and you're kind of grounding a bit, like, were they into this? Or, you know, I'm seeing, I don't know, a bowl with a flower painted on it. Like, does that mean anything to you? That kind of thing. And everything that I said, the person was like, no, 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 that's not. And I'm like, okay. And at this point I'm thinking, am I just getting the wrong thing, or like what is going on here? But you know, the person seemed to want to continue, and it just ended up being a really strange experience. And I connected later with that person who'd had the really wonderful reading, because they said, oh, you know, like, how did that go? And I was like, I said, it was actually pretty weird. Like, you know, because I had experienced, you know, this person just kept showing up and was, I said, frankly, kind of seemed like a jerk. Like this person's past father just seems like a jerk. And I said, that was my experience. And she said, oh, he was, because they had been friends, and she knew that that her friend's father had been a real jerk, but the friend just wasn't ready. The friend wasn't ready. And so, you know, I guess the moral of that story is, you know, if you have, you know, even if you've had an amazing spiritual experience with a practitioner, you cannot drag your loved ones along with you on your journey. I understand it, because I've been guilty of this in the past, where, you know, you're starting to reconnect with yourself and your spirituality, and it's exciting and it's new, and you're seeing progress and you're healing and you're having these amazing experiences, and you genuinely want to bring your loved ones along for the ride, but lots of people aren't ready for it. You cannot drag your loved ones along on that journey with you. That was the moral of the story. But I stopped doing those kinds of readings, just because I didn't really enjoy them, to be honest. And I was just kind of feeling like an interpreter, and also it just I wasn't really enjoying it per se, and it felt important for me to actually put up boundaries about, you know, what energy is allowed to have access to me.
No, I totally understand. And if you aren't enjoying something, that is, it shows later on. And also it puts a big bearing on you. You know, it takes a lot of energy from you, right?
Yes.
And that's not good at all. So actually, you've had a strong journey. So you've had the auras, and then you're able to feel and speak with others, and have certain feelings. Now I know there's something else from you. What else spiritually that's strong in you that you've experienced?
I mean, for me these days, you know, I still have my love of tarot, of tarot cards. I think that they're just another tool to better understand ourselves, to communicate with the universe and all of that. I love that still. And that's why I've like created decks on it, because I just love it. But, you know, a really important aspect of my spiritual practice these days is related to my ancestors, actually. And it's actually really funny, because every single one of us has ancestors, obviously. Otherwise we wouldn't be here. We wouldn't exist. Literally every human has ancestors. And you know, something that I learned from all of my early, you know, refining myself kind of spiritual experience is that people are kind of the same after they transition. I don't even think of us as ever dying. I don't really believe any of us dies. I think we just transition, right? We just transition into being what I call post-physical. So, it's after being physical. And it's interesting that people say, oh, people don't change. It's kind of true. You don't just magically become an amazing person just because you've transitioned from being physical to post-physical. It's still the same character. You're still the same person. And so back when I was very young, so I never met my maternal grandfather. Both my grandfathers had passed either when I was very young or before I could remember anything or before I was born. And my maternal grandfather had passed before I was born. So I never met him, but I remember one time asking my mother about him, and as she was talking about him, because she would told me about, he used to be a swimmer and here are the things he used to do. In my mind, I got this picture of this very kind looking man, and he had this kind of wavy hair, and he was smiling and he just seemed so kind. And again, I was, I don't know, 3 or 4 at the time, so I didn't question it. I was just, seems like a really nice, he's really nice. I would have liked to have known him. And it was years and years later when I came across a picture in a photo book. It had belonged, I think, to my great aunt. It belonged to someone in the family. And I came across this photo and I'm like, it's the man. It's the man. He's not smiling quite as happy, but that's the man. And it turns out that was in fact my maternal grandfather, including the wavy hair, which is funny because I wouldn't have anticipated he would be someone with wavy hair, but he did in fact have wavy hair. And so for me, these days, honoring my ancestors and, having gratitude to them, looking to them for encouragement, that is a part of my practice these days, which, and for some people, in a more maybe, North Americanized or colonized world type of context, maybe like, oh, that's just weird. But in actually lots of cultures, it is still very common to honor ancestors, even in modern times. And so it's been a lovely way of reconnecting with my own, that aspect of my own cultural heritage. And even, because I am mixed, my other cultural heritage as well, because as I mentioned, we all have ancestors. We all came from somewhere. And so that feels very important to me. And especially as someone who has had such fraught experiences with family and has never otherwise known what it just feels like to just be safe and just be loved and just be cherished by family. To feel that with my ancestors is something I have just tremendous gratitude for. And I think anyone can embark on honoring your ancestors. And, I think sometimes people are afraid. They're like, this is the thing. When it comes to spirituality, so many people are afraid about what if I, let something bad in, or, what if there's bad things out there that I connect to? It's actually very simple because, just like in the physical world, there are good things that can happen. There are bad things that can happen. There are kind people and there are mean people. So same thing spiritually. So it's just about being really clear in your intent that, I'm only, you can light a candle and you can say, I'm offering up this, this candle with intention and sending love to my loving, wise, elevated, and benevolent ancestors. So that you're making it clear. They have to be loving. They have to be wise because, there's nothing wrong with having like loving, non-wise people in your life, but you want to get good advice too, right? So hopefully they're also wise and elevated. And by benevolent, I mean, that they're really well-intentioned, that they really do want what's best for you. So if you just set up those kind of clear boundaries, that's all that you're going to be connecting with, because it's the same thing like connecting with other people in the world. And the better also that we get at having spiritual boundaries, the better we're at having boundaries in the rest of our life, and vice versa. The better that we are having at having boundaries in the rest of our life, the better that we are having boundaries in our spiritual life.
Wow. With all this experience, no wonder why you're successful in business. Briefly, just go over your business, because just in case there's listeners here that haven't heard your podcast from before, just go over your business model and what you do, because I do believe part of your journey has influenced the way you interact with other people. So just briefly go over, what you do to help people in your business.
Yeah. So for my spiritual business, so I've created a couple of tarot decks and comprehensive guidebooks that go with them. I authored those. And it is because I think that tarot is such a beautiful and simple and also just amazing tool that can help people to reflect, because I'm a big fan of reflection, like in any part of your life, right? And even in like the corporate sector, we need to reflect. So I really believe in reflection. And the amazing thing about tarot specifically is that it is a complex system, but you don't have to understand the complexity in order to use it. What it is it's full of archetypes, and like archetypes of the kinds of situations that we deal with in life. Like any kind of life experience you're having, you can find it in the tarot, right? And so it is like an encyclopedia of encyclopedias of wisdom and support and learning and self-learning. And I believe that is just so empowering. And so I mostly, because I otherwise don't have, lots of services or anything available at this time, just given my medical situation, I'm just not able to do that. But I do have these tarot decks, and, I do also have some digital empowering products, because, I've had a blog for years, and, for years I wasn't, that was literally all I was doing. I just wanted to share, here are these how-tos that I learned that helped me. Here's a simple how to get started with meditation. Here's how to, to know when is something a spiritual issue and I can deal with it spiritually. When should I actually seek professional counseling, for example? I've talked about all those kinds of things. I've talked about toxic positivity, or some people may refer to it as, the prosperity gospel, or the idea of spiritual bypassing. I've talked about those issues. So I have hundreds and hundreds of blog posts on all things empowerment, self-healing, spiritual development. And that is really what my passion is, because at the end of the day, I hope this comes through in everything, that I just care so much about people. I know what it's like to go through really crappy stuff. I know what it's like to encounter difficulties both internally and externally. And I think that as much as we cannot control some of the external stuff coming at us, we always have so much ability within ourselves to find internal resources and to become meaningfully resilient, as we've talked about before, and to develop ourselves and to become more aligned, internally aligned. I talked earlier about how we become fragmented. We have so much capacity to bring ourselves back together. And so that's what it's all about. That's really what it's all about, that I want to help people to do that. And also I've been told that the blog is really pretty.
Well, I'll tell you what, listeners, what I'm going to do, I'm going to put all the information down so you're able to go to our blog and any other of her products, digital products that can help you. Are you okay with that?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, for sure.
Because let me tell you something. The reason why we're on our third podcast is, and I said this the first time, didn't I? I said, God, you're such a wonderful, bright, you're such a happy, the energy, her aura was so bright. Yeah, we're talking about auras. It was so bright. And I knew that from the first time I started speaking to her. And the reason why we're on the third podcast is because there's so much to this beautiful lady. And this is why we're talking about spiritualism right now. So you can only do well by actually connecting with her, looking at her blog, and also with the digital information she has to help you, because trust me, it's will be coming from the point of love, and that's the great thing with her. And as we speak now, I'm trying to think of a reason to have a fourth podcast. I can't think of one right now, but trust me, I'll find a way. It's because She's
I
so
am
wonderful.
always so happy to come and chat with you, Eli. I have so enjoyed every single one of our conversations. And if you can think of another
Yeah, we'll
of
do.
another topic, I'm very happy to come on back.
Don't worry. There will be a fourth one. I will be creative. But right now, it eludes me. But I will be traveling very soon. I will be flying in a few hours' time, and that's when I do my great thinking when I'm traveling, especially at long journeys. So, but beware, Malumir. By the time that journey finishes, you'll be getting a phone call from me to say, I thought of the fourth podcast. So we shall see. We shall see. So with that said, um, we will have the details just at the bottom there. We unfortunately have to put a line in the sand. I would love to speak with her far more, but unfortunately that's not possible. But between you and me, listeners, there will be a fourth podcast. Haven't thought of it, what it is, but it's going to happen. It's going to happen. Thank you. Thank you again for joining us and to showing again your wonderful wisdom and your happiness.
Thank you so much for having me back, Eli. And, and I just really hope that, and just something that I would just love to, share as a last thought for folks is, even if you're going through something that is really, really difficult and you feel that you have no say or no control, first of all, I want to validate that you're going through something hard and that, yeah, you probably have very little say and control. And the thing is that you have some, and I believe in you, and you can find that thing. You'll find your own way. I just encourage you, start connecting really with yourself and with the feelings you're actually having. And I don't know what it is that folks are going through, but something that was kind of a repeated pattern the past week is that in a couple of different cases, people were chatting with me who were experiencing anger about a particular situation, the different situations, different people. And what I encouraged them to do is I said, you know what, it's okay to feel that, because anger is just information. Don't compress it. Like, acknowledge that it's there. And so for whoever is going through that, because I feel really intuitively strongly that someone is going through something where you need to hear that it's valid to feel what you're feeling. Don't ignore it. Find a way to transmute it into something that serves you. Okay. Anyway, I don't know who that was for, but that felt really like I really needed to say that. So thanks for your patience, Eli.
Oh, there we go. You see what I mean? Maybe we should do this live with a few people on the other end, and maybe get her just reading away. I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. But in the meantime, everybody, sayonara, and thank you for joining us. Sayonara.